one of the first things I did at Ginsburg is for them to get out of the welfare mentality. It's essential for them to pay your apportionment is a beginning way for people to say, hey, wait a minute. We exist to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the world. So too many of our churches have this welfare mentality. And so here's the danger. The bishop said to me, if your church didn't pay its apportionment, our conference would be bankrupt. So the danger of a core church or Ginsburg is you become kind of the size or scope of a district in a sense. So I believe, I think we have to sharpen. There's a lot of waste in our apportionments because of the size of our bureaucracy. But at the same time, I believe that it's important for our church folk to understand that this is the way that we are being the hands and feet of Jesus in the world. They don't always understand connection, but they do understand mission. And until we can be faithful to this mission, so I don't sell the institution. I said, do you know what would happen if there wasn't an African university? Do you know what would happen if there wasn't the Methodist Children's Home over in Columbus? Do you know what would happen if there wasn't Redbird Mission? As a matter of fact, some of our business people had to go down with Redbird Mission. They were going to close their school and had to help them figure out how to restructure their financials. So some of our folks, Jim Taylor went down to when he heard about that to Redbird Mission. So they don't understand connection. This is not a generation who understands, like my parents, it's our responsibility. What they have a heart for is to make a difference in the world. Connect them to the difference in the world, not support the institution. Jesus never used people to support an institution. He fulfilled God's purpose to help people be part of God's creative, redemptive purpose in the world. That's how we have to sell it. I have a degree in marketing, which has helped also, a degree in social work and marketing. And as pastors, we have to be social workers, and we have to know how to market too. Every leader needs a clear picture, a strategic plan, and a persistent practice. One of the reasons I would not want to be involved in politics is the current president had a great picture, but the strategic plan and everything to make the strategic plan happen is not working or had time to work. And then we're going to elect someone else, if not in the next election, 4 years after that. And so there's not a persistent practice. We keep changing. So now we have one health care plan. If the other administration comes in, that will be undone. And then so we keep, and there's no persistence. And so yes, what I'm telling you is basically, last night the theological foundation applies to all of us, regardless of what size. Now this strategy I'm talking about, picture, plan, and practice, applies to any size church. And General Motors is much bigger than our churches. Maybe it's bigger than our denomination. And they realized you have to downsize. You have to right size. We live in a world, postmodern world is a world of revolutionary change. So prior to 1980-81, in modernity, we lived in evolutionary change where you could manage it. You can't manage it, radical, revolutionary change. And that's why simplifying is critical to the time where we're in. So you see this simple structure. This is the fourth largest church in our United Methodist denomination. So there's only 3 larger than Ginsburg Church. So if it's working at Ginsburg Church with 12 people, I would think it would work with everyone on down, wouldn't you? Because there are 12 people are managing a multi-million-dollar organization with various 501c3s. Okay, we're going to finish right here. Practice, right? Picture, plan, practice. Fruitfulness is the result of a long, sustained, persistent action in the same direction. Fruitfulness is the result of the long, sustained, persistent action in the same direction. You can't think just because you started cell ministry that you can sit back and cell ministry's going, because assumption is the mother of all screw-ups. And it's really quoted in a different way, but I'm a pastor and had to quote it that way. I was tempted to quote it the other way, but God's still working on me. But what you can't, because what I discovered quickly is that those groups are no longer discipleship groups, they're friendship groups. And there has to be a continued, it means continued training, it means the kind of quality leaders that you bring into that situation, but fruitfulness is a result of long, sustained, persistent action in the same direction. You look at David, and I study leaders in the Bible constantly. And David was a person after God's own heart. And David was God's choice to be a military leader. In the spring of the year, when kings go out to battle, this is the temptation in ministry. David thought, I deserve a break today. And he stayed home. And you can imagine with all of the tensions and battles that David fought, beginning in his early years, the whole thing back and forth with Saul and maintaining his integrity in that relationship, you get tired. Anybody in the house ever get tired? Right? And so you just think, I am going to take a breather. And when David took a breather, he lost his integrity. He lost the force of his movement. So, sisters and brothers, we need to remember that we're not called to maintenance, but a aggressive movement forward. I truly believe I've wrestled with years with that scripture, Matthew 11:12, and it says, and from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. And what does that mean? What does that mean? It seems all out of character with Jesus, but then what I really began to understand is this is an aggressive, all-out movement forward. And in the spring of the year, when kings go out to battle, we go out to battle aggressively with all that we have within us until the day we take our last breath. That's a great response, however long it takes. However long it takes. To me, that's when I said yes to Jesus. Follow me. And the foxes have nowhere to lay their head. I mean, the foxes have no den. The birds of the air have no nest. Especially when he said, let the dead bury the dead, because Elijah let Elisha go home and bury his dad. It was the same question. Can I go home and say goodbye to those at home? And Elijah said yes. But that Jesus said someone higher than Elisha's here, Jesus said no. You have to have one life focus. And that's what we signed up for. That's why I'm here today. That's why I taught 3 hours yesterday afternoon to do anything I can of what God has showed me to encourage and empower you. I'll get on a plane and go to Florida tomorrow. And then I've got to get a sermon ready for when I get back. And then I'll go from Florida to Dallas-Fort Worth. And I'm 60. It's why when I was 20-something, I preached one sermon. When I was a weekend, when I was 30-something, I did 2, mid-30s, 3, 40s, 4, 60s, 5. I know. But again, we should not be thinking that we have come to a place of privilege. Leadership is to example, not exemption. The call of leadership is to example. Ministry is work. Hello. And, I'm finding a lot of, where I teach at United Seminary, a lot of students who are older than me. And they've had like 5 careers that they've never been successful in, and they still have to work, and they think ministry is going to be easier than working for Panasonic. Hey, you know how long you would last at Panasonic? In this kind of competitive environment, they're going to take the best. That's what we have been called to. Right here.
I just want to respond to some of the comments you're making about the call, and I'm new into the ministry. Just had my first part-time appointment starting July 1st, and it is amazing to me that a lot of the water thrown on my fire for the call comes from the people that have also answered the call ahead of me. You're only part-time is what I keep hearing, and I have a heart for God, and I want to serve Him, and I want to find that vision that He's calling me to, and whenever I hear those words, it just is like throwing a wet blanket.
Well, live into your calling, because, one is what I do is not based on my pay. When I said I had to do 2 worship services, and then I got blowback from the church because then we won't know each other. Everything you do, there is resistance. Now, when we did 3, there was no blowback, because you had to, if you fight the good fight, if we did. But they didn't pay me to do 2. They didn't pay me to do 3. They didn't pay me to do 4, because the pay wasn't based. It's what blows me away is that in some of our boards and agencies, we have employees who are members of unions. In nonprofit, I don't understand. I believe in unions. As a matter of fact, I'm still a member of Retail Clerk Local 1099 union. But you can't have unions in a calling. See, that's about economic justice. And you see, what we're doing is something else. So my tenure, my commitment to Ginghamsburg never had anything to do with money I would make. Obviously, I would have moved to a bigger church and a bigger church. And that's God's problem. My problem is to fulfill the call that God has placed on me. Also, 2 of the biggest churches in our district now are restarts out of Ginghamsburg who have local licensed pastors who have a 12th grade education. Now, what are we going to do? Rudy Rasmus, my good friend, and it has one of the 11 largest Methodist churches in the country in Houston, Texas, and he's a licensed local pastor. He flunked out of seminary. I said, Rudy, he's a good friend, so we can have these conversations. I said, how'd you flunk out of seminary? Bishop, Rudy? He said, well, I went to the evangelism class, and this professor who had never had any experience doing anything was teaching evangelism. So I thought, hell, I should be teaching that class. And got up and walked out. And he said, I forgot to officially withdraw. So that's how he flunked out of seminary. We're going to have to rethink how we do ministry in the church. And what we need are people like you who identify the call. Now, we have to be accountable. What I like about the United Methodist Church is, as crazy as I am, they hold me accountable. But as crazy as I am, there's a whole lot of other denominations that wouldn't have me because I'm dangerous. But these people, even though I'm ADD and dangerous, say, you can play on our team. I love this church. Again, we have tremendous theology. Our methodology sucks. Our methodology is broken. And we need entrepreneurs who can reimagine. Back here's a question.
What do you say to our workaholic pastor?
Well, workaholic, if you are a workaholic and you don't have what I call here, pay attention to, in this practice, pay attention to critical personal disciplines, which are spiritual, physical, and relational. That's absolutely essential. And if you're paying attention to critical personal disciplines, spiritual, physical, and relational, then you will not be a workaholic. Some of you know my story. I wrote about it in Momentum for Life when Carol and I almost got divorced at 20 years of marriage, 20 years ago. And it's when we realized that our covenant to each other came above our covenant to the church. So things in our life changed. My son's senior baseball season at the University of Pennsylvania, we moved to Philly for the baseball season. We rented a carriage house. That family is a priority over the church. And I only flew back the whole baseball season to preach Easter weekend. So I only missed 4 baseball games of his whole senior season. And that's part of, too, what I'm demonstrating to my church of how we're to live as family. But also what I'm doing is building disciples who can lead the church. So again, practice is paying attention to critical personal disciplines, spiritual, physical, and relational. I want to say one other thing before we wrap this up this morning, is that numbers matter. Now, why do numbers matter? In the church, because, we're hearing a lot now, Bishop, the bishops want us to be more accountable. And this is a good thing, Bishop. Don't back off on this. We need to begin to measure results and not activity in the church. And what we have been measuring is activity. So, Jay, if you turn in a report, well, I had a Bible study this week, I saw 4 people and all that. You're measuring activity, not results. Now, here's an example why. I want to know how many professions of faith we had last year at Gingsburg. That's part of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Bishop, when I went through 5 annual conferences last year, the best was one of the conferences had 58% of the churches that had not one baptism or profession of faith, and the rest were in the 60%. That 60% of United Methodist churches have not one baptism or profession of faith a year. That's not being the church, sisters and brothers. Secondly, we have GED programs in Dayton. Now, I want to know, okay, fine, there are 28 people in the last Fort McKinley GED class. I don't want to just know how many people were in that class. I want to know how many of them got their GEDs, and I also want to know how many of them were connected to the local community college. You see, that is results. We're not setting people free if we're not measuring results and not just activity. You understand where I'm coming from? So that, do not get upset when your bishop wants to know these kind of numbers, because these numbers are really helping us begin to say, hey, are we really producing a product? Or are we just coming to work every day? And the product is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. If you don't like that, go get another job. Because ministry is not a job, it's a calling. It is a calling. We're codependent ministry. So on our boards of ministry, when I was on the board, and it was like, well, we turned this person down 5 times, and it doesn't matter that they have failed in 4 of the objectives that we put, and they never did this, and we put them on a health program, and they gained 45 pounds. Well, what would they feel if we rejected them again? So right there, we have to begin to have a tougher standard.